Hello.
Our story begins on Polis Massa following the death of Padme Amidala. The trio of Bail, Obi-Wan, and Yoda were preparing to leave the planet, but Yoda wanted one more test to be done. He requested for the children have their M counts checked, so Obi-Wan did so, and when the results came back, they revealed something that was very troubling. Neither of the twins had the ability to connect to the Force. Bail suggested they talk about this inside the Tantive 4, and put the children to sleep in another room. Due to Luke and Leia not having any Force sensitivity, there remained the question of what the Jedi should do going forward. Yoda was relatively hopeless because he had failed. The Force was leading him to a different path, that of a hermit. He would go to Dagobah so that he could continue his own lessons with Qui-Gon Jinn, and look for a chance to feel a sense of redemption. Obi-Wan wasn't really feeling all that hopeful either, but where would he go? Kenobi had no intention of becoming roommates with Yoda, so he thought he might just try to find himself again. There were places around the galaxy that needed his help, and he would do it. Yoda didn't support this idea and suggested that Obi-Wan go to Tython, Tempest, Lothal, or Ahch-To to continue his training, specifically the training that involved the lessons Qui-Gon was able to pass down. Obi-Wan was willing to learn this, but he didn't know if he could sit still. Had there been a reason to, he could use that as an excuse, but for someone who held themselves to high standards, to not have an excuse or a reason to stay put, how could he just do that? Kenobi told Yoda that he would try and stay at one of those various locations and see what came of it. Yoda could sense the hesitation, so he perked up, telling Obi-Wan how important it was for them to remain in secret until the time was right. Kenobi nodded his head, and they had a couple more discussions until eventually getting to their separate locations. Obi-Wan chose Lothal because it had a population and it was in the Outer Rim territories, so it wasn't close to anywhere the new Empire would be. The planet would be safe for him, for the time being. Bail, on the other hand, would bring Luke and Leia to Alderaan and begin raising them with his wife. Rey was overjoyed with having Luke and Leia with them. The twins would have this perfect little life for the next several years as they grew up. Obi-Wan would keep close in contact with Bail. Kenobi always wanted to know how the children were doing and if they were showing any signs. He believed the M-count check was realistic, but who knows? They might show signs, and if they did, then Kenobi could start to train them. He spent about 7 months on Lothal before going off-world to help other Jedi. He stayed low-key, and those he found he sent back to Lothal, so that they could find home in the field where he had been. Something about Lothal brought Obi-Wan hope. Without this hope, he would have lost himself. Kenobi didn't use his blade like he did during the Clone Wars. Truthfully, he hadn't even touched the blade since he arrived. But he didn't let go of his focus on the Force. He still practiced and meditated. He was hopeful and, almost in a way, praying for the twins to be gifted with Anakinskywalker's powers. If they got his power, they could be the future Yoda referenced. But it was because of this that Obi-Wan left the planet. There were rumors that the Empire was hunting down Force-sensitive people, so anyone that showed signs would be brought in, likely killed by the Empire. Without Luke and Leia to watch over, Obi-Wan needed to find a future for the Jedi, though most of the individuals of the Fallen Order weren't going to be that future. On Alderaan, as the years went by, the twins embraced their life. The two of them never learned that they weren't biological, but one of their cousins revealed the truth to them. They didn't like him, so they didn't believe him, but Bail and Rey confirmed that he did speak the truth. It was hard for them. However, Luke and Leia embraced the Organas as the Organas did them. Aside from this, it was a pleasant life for the twins, the Prince and Princess of Alderaan. They were royalty. They played in the forest outside the palace, and they would spend their time with little droids and point out star cruisers leaving the local spaceport. Because they grew up with each other, they were able to build friendships easier, but it was a typical upper-class life. Not bland, but perfect. From state dinners, higher learning, extraordinary trips, or playing in the palace, the twins had the best life. Outside of Alderaan, about after 7 years, Obi-Wan would have his own adventure. Without having a student capable of stopping the Sith, he became focused on how he might stand up to Palpatine. The Empire was growing. There were Inquisitors and also a masked creature. Kenobi didn't know this individual by seeing him, but by learning of him, and he didn't know their name. He just knew that there had been some Jedi he saved that had interacted with it. There were some other Jedi Obi-Wan saved that did come to Lothal, while others were on their own. Through his journeys, he'd come across Omega, Quinlan, Asajj, Barriss, and a number of other Force sensitives, including a fight with Morgan Elsbeth, one she narrowly escaped from. However, it was during this fight that Kenobi was able to obtain the plans for the TIE Defender, something Elsbeth planned on introducing to a number of Imperial moths. Obi-Wan also learned of something else, that there was a rumored secret apprentice of the Emperor. To Kenobi, this was too good to pass up. In Kenobi's mind, it would be a young, former Jedi, so he made an effort to get to Coruscant. It was nearly impossible for someone like Obi-Wan to get there, so he used civilian transport, but hid in the luggage area so he wouldn't be found. Obi-Wan's short stint on Coruscant would be very difficult. The city had changed. While many Venators were decommissioned and scrapped, those that weren't littered the skies of the city. It was a shameful change, but not as painful as the change to the Jedi Temple. Kenobi was in contact with Bail, and he had scouts report on movements outside the Imperial Palace. Due to Obi-Wan being a Jedi, he used a lower-level entrance. Because the city built up around the temple, there was an entirely secretive entrance on the bottom side of it. Many of the younglings that survived Order 66 likely used it to escape. Obi-Wan moved through and found it was blocked off, but it wasn't a big blocker, something he could very easily get rid of, so he did. Kenobi's sole purpose here was to recover this fallen Jedi, or whatever it was that Sidious was training. Kenobi moved through stealthily, as he made his way into what was once the Great Hall of the Temple. He closed his eyes and felt the Force. The Emperor wasn't supposed to be here according to Bail. Kenobi ran forward and ducked behind a wall as a couple royal guards passed by. Obi-Wan looked for an opening and then darted towards the edge of the hall. He climbed some stairs and a thud came from behind him. A Pa-Un man ignited his lightsaber, introducing himself as Grand Inquisitor. Hello, and told Obi-Wan to stand down. This didn't need to be difficult. Kenobi backed up, looking for the Child of the Force, starting to believe that they weren't even here. But when he got to the top of the steps, he saw a child sitting in the middle of the floor. Behind them was a man shrouded in darkness. His yellow eyes pierced Obi-Wan's skin as he looked at the evil man who destroyed the Jedi Order. Kenobi's lightsaber ignited and Grand Inquisitor lunged at him. Kenobi blocked and threw him around so he could keep his eyes on Sidious. Their blades passed each other. Grand Inquisitor was very talented, but Obi-Wan was far beyond him. Kenobi thrusted his blade forward, avoiding the connotation he had for being the former master of Form 3. For a former Jedi, it was a struggle, because it was an unexpected attack. Obi-Wan used the Force and launched Grand Inquisitor across the room and into Palpatine's chair. Sidious didn't expect it, but Kenobi ran up and picked up the child, asking if they were alright. All he got back was a blank expression, like the child was incapable of expressing emotion. Obi-Wan told them that it would be alright, as he turned and ran with the child in his arms. He could hear Sidious rise and call for his guards. Kenobi used the Force to throw the royal guards into walls and pillars. Obi-Wan continued running forward until Sidious' Sith howl could be heard. He turned back and parried a strike, falling backwards as he did. His momentum allowed him to put his hand under his body and push himself up, while holding the kid with his other hand. Obi-Wan turned back and blocked what he could. The Grand Inquisitor was rushing this way as it was. Kenobi wouldn't be able to win this fight alone, and he couldn't do it with one hand. Luckily for him, Sidious was actually actively trying to avoid hitting the secret student. This gave Obi-Wan the ability to defend himself enough to survive this encounter. Their blades continued passing by each other, and Kenobi was able to gain a minute advantage. He kicked Sidious's wrist and slashed the wall next to him as he ducked under the entrance he came into. The ceiling closed behind him, and he ran as fast as he could. Sidious raged. He couldn't believe it. He never should have protected the child the way he did. That was one mistake he would have to correct. He told Grand Inquisitor to get the Inquisitors to track down Kenobi, stall him until Vader could arrive. Vader was inside of his personal destroyer orbiting the planet. But there would be no engagement. Obi-Wan had a pickup ready for him, one that brought him right back to the Tantive 4 and quickly escorted him off of Coruscant. Bail and Obi-Wan spoke throughout the entire duration of their trip. Firstly, Obi-Wan wanted to know if the twins were showing signs, and yet again, there was no answer. Bail then wanted to know about this child he found, and Kenobi reported that she had a high midichlorian count. She hadn't spoken though, likely due to trauma of being Palpatine's student, but he could bring her back to Lothal and try to expose her to the Enclave. Perhaps she would then speak. Bail wondered if it would be a good idea to expose the twins to the group of Jedi, and Obi-Wan didn't see why they couldn't. It would help them rally together in their fight against the Empire, but it also could inspire them to start using the Force if they had such abilities hidden within them. The truth is, though, they wouldn't show signs. The Force was so outraged by Skywalker's inability to bring balance to the Force that it cursed his bloodline. The Skywalkers would never ever have the ability to wield the Force. Didn't matter if it was 1 generation or 100, no one would ever be able to use the Force in their bloodline again. Kenobi didn't realize this, and neither did Bail, but Obi-Wan and the child were dropped off first so that Bail could bring the twins and explain to them everything. It took a couple days to get the girl to speak, but she revealed her name to be Mara Jade. She didn't know anything else about herself. All she knew was fear, and that fear was of the Emperor. Though something that helped the young Sith trainee was being around a bunch of Jedi, individuals who faced the darkest of days, but rejected it. There were only 100 survivors of the Jedi Purge, and 13 of them were Inquisitors. The rest of the survivors were either killed by Vader, or on the run, or here. Obi-Wan collected as many as he could. Someone who was added to his enclave was a local boy who had just lost his parents. He was 7, while Mara was 5. He was hurting pretty badly, but like her, he had a high sensitivity to the Force. Ezra Bridger had been with the Enclave for a couple of months, and he was really coming out of his shell. The Jedi had been looking for his parents, but couldn't find him. Obi-Wan introduced Ezra to Mara so that he could potentially help her with her struggles. The twins, on the other hand, were brought from the palace all the way out to Lothal, where they'd interact with Force users for the first time. It was really saddening for Obi-Wan. They got along with the other kids really well. They loved the Jedi, but when they watched a former Jedi lift an object, the Force, they mimicked it, but they couldn't do anything. Their hands moved up and acted the same way the Jedi did, but the object never moved. All that happened was nothing, just a stagnant lack of motion. Luke and Leia were disheartened by this because some of the older Jedi described it as the gifts that some had and others didn't. They just kinda wished they could do it too. They were optimistic though. They could help the cause in other ways. The next decade would be very similar to the 7 years that preceded it. Kenobi would be the predominant instructor of the Fallen Order. When Luke was 15, 2 years before this, he had a phase where he was drawn in by Imperial propaganda. He almost got so into it that he considered exposing his friends at the Jedi Enclave on Lothal, but he didn't realize they had moved from the planet to Tempest. The reason they did so is because the Empire showed up in Lothal. Luke, after 7 or so months, would come out of this little phase and apologize for getting so wrapped up in the Empire. There was just a sense of patriotism that was used against him to support a system of oppression. Such oppression he never saw because he was in an elevated position in society. As a Prince of Alderaan, he would never face the wrath of the Empire firsthand. Despite Breya and Bail being against Palpatine in every way possible, the Empire wouldn't do anything per se. They were a core world, and planets of the core were to be respected as an upper-class system, though Palpatine had all of his plans together if he ever needed to make an example of the Alderaan system. Luke and Leia, while not being Force-sensitive, would find other means of being useful. They spent several years at the best schools and academies in the core, which happened to be on Alderaan. They knew that while their father was a senator, they both couldn't be that either. Bail expressed that he wanted one of them to replace him, and the twins understood that it would be a competition to see who came out on top. So they did two things. They'd practice in blaster skills and get more grounded skillfulness, stuff like recon, sneaking around, commanding, while they would be also hardening their skills in the political arena. As twins, this made them extremely hands-on. If they were Force-sensitive, it would have aided them, but their brother and sister competition made it so they thrived to be better than the other. This obviously wasn't a bad thing. Their focus was solely on being the best version of themselves, so while they were working on making sure they got to the top of their individual game, the sibling rivalry encouraged them to go even further. As top students in all their placements, classes, and workshops, they were ready to push for more advancements in the political arena. On the other hand, they were crazy good shooters. Leia preferred a pistol, but Luke used a cycler rifle unlike anyone else. The weird irony is, Luke wasn't even supposed to have a grip on a cycler rifle. It was broken and he fixed it for fun. When he started using it, he found a natural affinity for it. Due to being Bail's children, they were already working closely with the Alliance. One of these missions included them dropping off Hammerhead corvettes to the rebels on Lothal. Ezra was not a part of the Ghost Crew, but Kanan was. The Jedi Order, on the other hand, had their own growth. While their order wasn't large or much larger than it was 10 years beforehand, it was more experienced. Obi-Wan was holding down the fort on Tempest by instructing students. The two prize students of the Order were Ezra and Mara, who had a semi-romantic thing going on. Obi-Wan wasn't really sure, but it wasn't really any of his business, in his opinion. Kenobi just taught everything he knew and aided rebels across the galaxy. In time, he did learn of Vader, but he never ran into him. This was entirely because Vader had a leash on him. He almost lost a fight to a Jedi named Seer, and because of that, Palpatine thought Vader was too focused on finding Kenobi, so he can find him. This was true. Vader was reckless because Kenobi evaded him on Coruscant, and he hadn't found him since. This made Vader irritable, and Sidious noticed this. And because Palpatine was pissed at himself for losing Mara, he punished Vader to make himself feel a bit vindicated. It worked, but Vader was even more upset because he was punished for him. With Bail preparing to move away from the Senate, he suggested moving Luke and Leia into the electoral spot, but Palpatine put a block out, suggesting that any senators that lost their re-election, their seat would lose their validity. So Bail was stuck with holding his seat to ensure he didn't lose any power in the Senate, which was already in shambles. The twins were okay with this and told their dad that they were going to join up with the Alliance. They did join up with Obi-Wan on Tempest, as the two longtime students were going off to assist Saw Gerrera. Due to his time with the Alliance, Obi-Wan was able to dissuade some of the more aggressive attributes that belonged to Saw. So Ezra and Mara were joining a tactically sound rebel leader who was working in tandem with the rest of the Alliance. Their mission would be one that would grind the Imperial war machine to a halt. It would also be a mission in which these individuals first interacted with Thrawn. Though the battle would be a victory for the Alliance, they were still the ones who ran from the conflict. They cracked a hole in a shipyard that ran supplies to major producers across the Empire, including one that worked on Stardust. It was also the first time the rebels ever heard of such a weapon, and it would be Saw who became obsessed with finding it. He knew that the key to defeating the Empire was finding their weakest assets, exposing them, and then destroying them. Kenobi believed this wasn't the best idea, but he was willing to support it. With Luke and Leia joining the ranks of the Alliance, Kenobi had more quote-unquote assets to use. He wanted the twins to stick with Saw, as he repositioned Ezra and Mara to move with Cassian Andor and Luther and Rael. With Saw, it'd be a special op for the two Organas, but it would be the perfect making of a squad. The quick shot and the sharpshooter, a deadly duo if used correctly. As this was happening and the twins were introduced to the life as rebel fighters, Saw's obsession with Stardust brought him to Scarif, where he uncovered one of the most terrifying things the galaxy had ever seen. The base wasn't complete yet, far from actually, but it was a work in progress. Saw left and informed the Alliance as quickly as he could. The only issue is, everyone was spread out too thin, so Kenobi offered up his assistance, and a small task force was gathered up to approach the Death Star. When they arrived at the superstation, the task force quickly moved into the building quickly. Obi-Wan was here to protect the rebels from any Force users that might find themselves on this weapon. Luckily for them, there was only one. Unluckily, it was the twins' father. Vader was here doing yet another mundane mission for his master. Palpatine wanted the workers to double their production output, mostly because he wanted the super weapon to be operational so he could use it on the rebels. Vader was walking with some technicians when he felt the presence of his old master. Kenobi was here. The rebels were looking for a way to blow up the superstation from the inside, but it was nearly impossible. They were maneuvering around a moon-sized space station. Luckily for them, Obi-Wan suggested they use stormtrooper outfits and sneak their way around. Saw had been doing that since the Empire formed, and it was a great idea. The space station was too large for them to navigate without Imperial armor. Kenobi then told them all that he would split up and see if he could create some distractions. He hadn't sensed Vader. He was simply working to make sure the rebels had enough diversions to make it down to the reactor room without any trouble. As Kenobi did this, he led Vader straight to his position. This Obi-Wan was not beaten down by age or spending 20 years under the suns of Tatooine. He was a leader, and he was a makeshift Grand Master. When Vader came across him, he knew what this meant. It was time for the rematch of the century. Kenobi didn't see anything left of Anakin when he confronted Vader. All he was an evil being, one with no care for anyone in the galaxy. Sadly, that was something Vader could live with. His lightsaber ignited, and so did Vader's. The two longtime friends, now enemies, engaged. Obi-Wan was slow into this engagement. He didn't know what Anakin learned since their last fight, so he started off by using Form 3, his base form, and Vader parried and attacked it with precision. As Obi-Wan suspected, Vader spent the last 2 decades preparing for this moment. While Kenobi knew that Vader was out there, he never came to look for him, because his purpose was rebuilding the Jedi Order and supporting rebel movements. Obi-Wan swung forward, switching into Form 4 and catching Vader off guard. In the lower levels of the base, the twins along with Gerrera and his squad were making their way to the reactor room. They were able to avoid Imperial patrols with their uniforms, and then they were stopped by an officer, one who believed they were rebels, due to all the reported attacks in the station. The officer played the game right by suspecting the rebels would dress as Imperials as a means to get down here. Unluckily for him, it was just him and no one else, so the officer was shot down and the rebels moved forward. Luke took up a defensive position in the hallways as Saul moved in with his technicians to get to work on the reactor. They needed to be very delicate with this maneuver. Kenobi and Vader smashed their blades together as Imperial stormtroopers came to support, and by support, it meant watch. When else are you going to get a front row seat to watch your boss with temperament issues get his backside handed to him? The troopers loved this, as they watched Vader struggle before being thrown into a wall. Kenobi turned over and pushed the stormtroopers down a shaft, thinking they were there to kill him, not watch Vader lose. He turned back as Vader rose, electric sparks bouncing off his armor. Kenobi readied himself as Vader struck. Obi-Wan ducked under the strike and cut across Vader's hip before re-engaging. Vader tried to hold his own, but his impatience got the best of him. Due to not fighting with Obi-Wan since Mustafar, he was unable to defend himself from this onslaught. Kenobi was able to distance himself before cutting Vader's mask. What followed was a shared moment, a last chance for Anakin in his way to apologize to Obi-Wan, one where he told Obi-Wan that the death of Anakin Skywalker was not his burden. This was a relief like no other to Kenobi. Then Darth Vader returned. At his return, Obi-Wan was informed that all the systems were at go. Kenobi saw an Imperial shuttle and prepared to leave. Before he did, he turned to Vader and wished him a farewell. Their duel had taken so much time that the rebels got the reactor ready to burst, and they got to a transport. Kenobi took the shuttle in the hangar bay closest to him, believing it was Vader's, and left. Darth yelled Obi-Wan's name as he was left in the superstation that was engulfed in flames. It was truly a tragic end to the life of Anakin Skywalker, but it wasn't ended as Anakin, it was ended as Darth Vader. Once in hyperspace, Kenobi realized something. He made a little boo-boo, but in a way, it would work, potentially. What he learned was he ran into a ship full of Rhydonium that was being used to power different ends of the Death Star. It was a temporary power source, and never meant to be long-term. But Kenobi had enough Rhydonium to do some real damage, and upon the return to the secret base at Tempest, Obi-Wan would offer up himself as a sacrifice. But Luke and Leia had other ideas. They could use their technical skills to hardwire an Imperial astromech to the system, using it as a guide, one that could land the ship and detonate it. Though there was a problem. It would likely be a detonation that would claim civilian lives. Luke, Leia, and the Jedi didn't like that, but with Luthen Rael, Andor, and Saul present, they believed that the best alternative to fighting the Empire was removing the head of state. If they didn't, then people like Bail Organa would continue to lose power in the Senate. While Andor, Saul, and Luthen all had their reasons to hate the Empire, one thing was true. If the Senate was ripped apart, like Palpatine was clearly trying to do, then there'd be no backbone to the Imperial government. They needed a backbone with Palpatine gone. It could garner more use from the Imperial Senate, something the galaxy was so desperately in need of. As Luthen stated, they just had to hope that all that was killed were government officials. Dale decided that he would quietly force one of his Palpatine loyalist friends to suggest a senator retreat on the day of the planned bombing. It wouldn't take too long because many senators, even Palpatine loyal ones, were frustrated with their apparent lack of power. It'd give them a chance to discuss a potential future of their government, one where the Senate still had some sort of leverage. Due to how quickly Imperial chain codes were updated, this had to be done back to back to back, and luckily for the rebels, Luke and Leia were incredibly good at mechanics, a trait passed down by their biological father. So in accordance to the plan, the Imperial shuttle from the Death Star, the superstation that was now completely destroyed, landed at the Senate building. Palpatine was finishing up some extra emergency details in the Senate, essentially his plan for finalizing the destruction of the governmental body. He rushed out of the building, making his way to his personal shuttle as another Imperial one landed. He didn't think twice. He was going to Scarif to pick up the pieces of the Death Star and find Vader so he could punish him. However, as soon as he stepped foot inside of his shuttle, the one that just landed next to him, full of Rhydonium, detonated and engulfed the entire landing platform, as well as a good portion of the Senate building in flames. The Sith were dead. While Palpatine's death would seem like the end of the Empire, it wouldn't. The Inquisitors were still strong, and there were new Grand Admirals moving about, one of which being Thrawn. If the Empire was thought to be weak, they'd prove the Alliance wrong now. Though there was more trouble for the Alliance. While they achieved a small victory at the death of Palpatine, they turned him into a martyr. This was before the Death Star was made public knowledge, so the public just watched their Emperor die. For systems in the mid-rim, this was a victory, while in the core, it was seen as tragic, though the Empire reacted immediately. They followed their contingency orders, which was something Thrawn saw issue with. He was all for the Empire, but these orders seemed like the perfect way to lose steam. He was right. Thrawn was able to stop the contingency orders before they did serious damage to Imperial morale, but all the rallying against the Alliance came to a halt the moment Operation Cinder was moved into motion. Luke and Leia saw that there was weakness in the Empire, and decided that they would use their positions from Alderaan as reason to rally core citizens around the Alliance. It'd be very deadly for the two of them, but they split up for the first time. Both of them got a Jedi escort. Kanan went with Luke, as Ezra and Mara Jade accompanied Leia. The twins did what they needed to do, and despite still not showing any signs of the Force, their hearts were made of Kyber. Luke and Leia were split up for real, for the first time in their lives. That ironically was the most challenging thing about this mission for them. They were always hard-working, but they were doing it with each other, so when they were fighting for the Alliance and rallying people together without the other, they felt a sense of loss and dread, especially since they weren't able to communicate with others during their mission. They had to remain radio silent to protect themselves, so they no longer were able to talk to or see their sibling. However, this didn't mean they didn't keep their heads up, because they could still be competitive with each other even though they didn't see each other, which is how they made peace with their inability to be around the other. They wanted to outshine their other sibling for the betterment of the Alliance and allow them both to blossom individually, which was very positive for the two of them. However, despite their successes in the core, Thrawn was leading the Empire in their war against the Rebellion. He would be dramatically successful. His ability to find weaknesses of his enemy aided him in this fight against the rebels, and even though there were Jedi freedom fighters, they were easy to exploit. Thrawn made sure that every Jedi he came across he defeated, which worked really well for him. But the fight slowly became one that was even unstoppable for him. The young Organa twins were making quick work of his forces in skirmishes. Both Organas were commanders at this point, and he considered making a move against Alderaan, but the issue is, the Imperial Senate wasn't helping him. Without the Senate, or with Palpatine, he would have had free reign, but the Senate held him back, and they restrained him. This was the only reason the war would move unfavorably against the Empire aside from the rebels attacking. That and the additions of Admiral Raddus and Admiral Akbar. After 5 years of continuous combat, Thrawn would be forced to defend Anaxis, and it would be a battle in which the legendary sharpshooter, Luke Organa, would make his name renowned galaxy-wide, while his sister and fellow commander made her name equally as renowned, when she countered Imperial reinforcements which would have aided in Thrawn's escape. When the colors of the New Republic were raised above the galaxy, the people would unify and celebrate. Those who were victors of the war would be commemorated, including the Jedi, though there would still be a remaining stigma around the existence of the Jedi Order, and they'd be not welcome back to Coruscant or near the politics of the galaxy. While Palpatine was still held kind of like in a martyr-like status, the people, due to the war raging on for so long, kind of forgot about him. He was seen as a neutral individual, one who oversaw a war and then the growth of a gradually less free society. The Jedi would start their own new beginning with Obi-Wan leading the way. Yoda would return to see what he missed out on, though this return would only garner him an extra year of life. The new Jedi would become more balanced, and they would return to Lothal to build a new temple across from the old one. In a show of their new approach, Ezra and Mara would be the first real relationship in the Order seen in generations. Luke and Leia would begin their own respective pushes into the Senate, though Leia would be the one to win, only edging out her brother by 2.3% of the vote. Luke was very proud of his sister, as he course corrected and moved into the New Republic military, as a commander working closely with General Syndulla. Their respective home lives would be very different, but both would include families, though as per the will of the Force, the Skywalker legacy would remain one never gifted with the ability to use the Force again. They would never learn of their father's true identity either, but the twins would inspire many in different ways. And while the New Republic would demilitarize, there wasn't a substantial threat that would ever emerge to challenge them or wipe them out. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to our patrons: Benjamin Wells, Jango Fett Clone, Nick5098, M, INTJ Recluse, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tib, CC2024, Galva Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore Sir 1767, Darth Revan, Granddaddy Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewu 670, Anakin Jake Renner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny Nguyen, Sans the Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Street Gamer, Lord Calig, Young Lisa 66, Man Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, Fortis Lexi Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, Matthew First Names, Darkseid46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. Before supporting the channel, smash that like button. Let's talk about this story. So this one was a bit challenging to kind of take on, but I thought having two separate plot points kind of tugging at each other felt like the most appropriate way to handle this. Luke and Leia's life would probably be really pretty boring, honestly. They would just grow up the way Leia did, which was as royalty, helping out the Alliance when they got a little older, and learning how to become politicians. I think the added benefit of them going into a military academy kind of for like a part-time thing was kind of fun to do, because it just adds that extra benefit for them to have extra skills. But I wanted them to still have a usefulness without having the Force. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.